Many of those signs in the Quran mystified Muslim commentators in the first few centuries. You know, those signs from nature. When they wrote about them, they would come up with the most crazy theories about what the verse was referring to, because their knowledge was limited at that time and they had no idea what it was referring to. There's a verse in the Quran that talks about how God has planted mountains on the earth so it doesn't shake with you too much. One Muslim scholar wrote, famous Muslim scholar, wrote that that's because the earth sits on top of a huge body of water and there's a gigantic whale underneath that is supporting the earth, and when the whale shifts, the earth shakes, so the mountains sort of prevent the whale from shaking. I mean, this was, to him, science. That shows you how far people back then were from even getting a grasp on some of these signs. How erroneous were some of their notions back in those days. So you would suspect when you read the scripture, you would see some of that filtering into the scripture, but it did not. And I thought that was amazing. I thought the man definitely transcended, because I thought the author was a man, definitely transcended his time and place. I mentioned yesterday that the Quran states explicitly many times that it uses symbolism to make its point, that there are verses that are plain and that there are verses that are symbolic. Especially when you come upon references, I mean, this happened to me a few times. I'd come upon a reference referring to the day of judgment or the hereafter or heaven and hell that seemed too concrete, too suited to the mentality of the people at that time. And I gave some examples of it yesterday. And right after I came upon the first such reference, the Quran would say, and God is not shy of using any parable, even that of a gnat. It's not shy from using symbolism. Just when I found a reference that sort of conflicted with my reason, when it talked about the hereafter, in the very next verse, before I dismissed this Quran, the next verse says, but God does not shy away from using symbolism. And that type of thing would happen several times as I read through the Quran.